Welcome back to Philosophy for Flourishing, the podcast where we explore principles and practices for living the happiest, most fulfilling life possible. Today, I'm joined by Hannah Frankman. She's a job support advisor at Praxis, which is a really cool startup, startup in the job space. It's sort of like a college alternative. I'll let Hannah talk about it in a little bit, but sort of like a college alternative that preps people to start careers without having to go through the credentialing process of college and dropping a lot of money on a degree. And next week, she's also going to start teaching a course at Objective Standard Institute called The Art of Finding and Creating Opportunity, which I'm really excited about. So I'm really glad to have you on the show today, Hannah. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to chat.
So I wanted to start early on in your life with how you got introduced to alternative education, because if I'm reading between the lines, this sort of has a lot to do with where you've developed or how you developed in life.
Yes.
You were homeschooled, right?
Yes, I was. When you look at the story from 2020 hindsight, the whole thing makes sense, but it took me a really long time to realize that the alternative education trajectory was one I was going to stay on. I went to a private preschool and kindergarten, but basically I was always homeschooled from first grade all the way through to high school. I graduated as a homeschooler. I dually enrolled for one semester. I took one class at my local high school because I wanted to know what it was like. And that was the extent of my normal formal schooling experience. Everything else was grew up homeschooled, skipped college, started working for Praxis, which is, an alternative to college in that alternative education space. Basically my whole life has been alternative education.
And what sort of opportunities did that open up for you? Just thinking back to your younger years.
That's a really good question. Well, from an education standpoint, it gave me the opportunity to explore all the things that I was innately interested in. I loved school, which is part of why I said it took me a long time to realize that alternative education was a trajectory I was going to stay on, because when I was growing up, I was a super academic kid because I thought school was super fun because I got to do all the things that I wanted to do. I got to study all the subjects I thought were interesting, and it was just fun for me. So I thought I was college bound. If I had been on a normal trajectory, I probably would be getting a doctorate right now because that was just the kind of kid that I was. But it gave me the opportunity to just really go down rabbit holes that I thought were really interesting. And it also gave me the opportunity to really kind of blend education with the real world. I spent a lot of time just working on projects that I thought were really cool that over time kind of bled into things that look good on paper when you're trying to sell yourself for real opportunities, like running book clubs and classics discussion groups. And I started a literary magazine with my friends because I wanted a place to publish my writing. We had no circulation. We sent it to our parents, but we got a few friends involved and published it every quarter. And I was just doing all this stuff for fun because I had free time and I liked it. But over time, it was just a much more organic process for exploring the things that are interesting to you and applying them in real world areas that, really you just want to play. And instead of going through sort of the normal credentialing system where you're interested in this, so you take a formal class and you do these assignments, and it's much more regimented and much less customized to your specific interests.
Yeah. So in that, you really got to follow your own interests and figure out why do this or why do that.
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere about your first business. Is it right that you started a business when you're 12 years old? Not just but
yes. So this was completely by accident. I had no aspirations of being an entrepreneur. I'd love to be able to say I always wanted to be a business owner. I didn't. I had no idea what the word entrepreneurship meant until my mother informed me that I was an entrepreneur now because I was selling things. I one of the many hobbies that I dipped my toes into growing up was knitting. And I discovered very quickly that I didn't like following like the exact patterns. Like I wanted things to look the way I wanted it to look. So I'd start designing my own patterns, which is basically just customizing existing patterns to look more like what I had in my head. But my sister, I think she was like 5 or 6. I made her this knitted doll, and I loved dolls and doll catalogs, and like wanted every clothing item in the doll catalogs, and obviously like didn't get every piece of clothing in the doll catalog. So decided I was going to make some of the ones that I thought was really cool and made them for the doll that I made my sister. And she took it to our homeschool co-op, and all the moms thought it was really cool. Like they all loved it. And somebody asked me like if she could commission me to make her one that she was going to give to like her niece, I think. And so I made her a doll, and then other moms were interested, and I was like, oh, I can work with this. So I drew a little catalog that had pictures of like all the different hair colors that I could like put on the doll and these different outfits that I could make. And I gave them all like names. I designed it exactly like the doll catalogs that I thought were really cool. They're like, well, these work for me, so these are going to work for these people too, right? And it did. So yeah, I just had a little side business selling dolls to the moms in my homeschool co-op. And then I was selling them through like on commission through the store where I got my yarn. And I had like this whole line of dolls and accessories that for a couple of years, like that was my side hustle, just because I thought it was really fun and I liked making money. So I was like, this is great. I can totally work with this.
So you had this interest, and it sort of snowballed into, here's an opportunity. Oh, now I can do this. I can take it this direction. How does that relate to the course you're going to be teaching at OSI starting next week? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was not very strategic what I did as a kid. It was just for fun. But over time, as I've stumbled upon many more opportunities, and a lot of them much more intentionally as an adult, it all kind of comes from the same way of looking at the world, which I just discovered by complete accident as a kid and had no idea what I was working with until much, much later. But it's a very specific way of looking at the world that, again, like a lot of people stumble into it on accident, like I did. But where you see, like, I was making something that other people thought was cool, and they wanted to give me money to buy it, to give it to other people who they thought were cool, who would have thought it was cool. And so it like that's an opportunity. Like you have something that other people find valuable. And that's really, really the extent of how opportunity works in a lot of ways. Like you can provide something that's valuable to other people. They're willing to give you money or time or something else of value in exchange for what you're offering. And when you look at the world that way and you see opportunities in the way that you're interacting with people, you realize very quickly that there's opportunity everywhere. And like something has to flip that switch to start to see the opportunity that exists all around you. And that wasn't like the one defining moment where all of a sudden I saw the world differently and everything was changed from there on after. Like it was a much, much, much more gradual process, but it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about over the last few years, especially working with Praxis and helping young people understand how to go build awesome careers for themselves without like a traditional college trajectory. And like the traditional college credentials, it's the same thing. You have to convince people that what you have to offer is valuable and worth them exchanging something of value in return. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm coalescing into this course, The Art of Finding and Creating Opportunity.
Yeah. So continuing your story, how did you get involved with Praxis, and how did your relationship with Praxis develop? And maybe in there, you should also say a little bit more than I did about what Praxis is, because
Yeah. I'll give the context for Praxis first, and then I think people will see why I thought it was so cool and why I was like so stubbornly set on I have to be a part of this. So Praxis it's a 12-month college alternative program. It's a professional development boot camp and apprenticeship program where young people, we've had everything from kids who've graduated from high school early to people who already have college degrees and have started working and are looking for a career change, to everything like in between that age spectrum. Mostly like college age people are gravitated towards the program just because like it aligns with the stage of life that they're in. But basically it helps people who don't necessarily have the skills and the credentials on paper that they need to be able to land like a real career job, the type of things that people go to college to be credentialed for. We spend like 6 months teaching them all of the hard and soft skills that they need to crush it in those jobs, to like actually be qualified. We help them build a portfolio of projects that proves their ability to do the types of work they'd be doing in these entry-level roles. And then we place them in jobs at primarily tech startups, but really all different types of startups and businesses in like basically all the non-technical roles. So sales, marketing, customer success, operations, those types of things. And then we coach them through those first 6 months on the job while they're getting geared up and they're learning how to crush it in their roles. They're figuring out like, okay, this is awesome. This is how I want to grow in the company. This is where I want to go from here. Basically, it's a career launch program.
And
when I was
for just a second, because I was telling you before we got on the call that, you know, last night I actually gave a little talk to some Praxians, some people that are currently in the Praxis program. And I've interacted with some Praxis graduates and different people in the past, and have always been really impressed. But I was giving a talk on writing, because I also teach a course for Objective Standard Institute on writing. And the level of questions and the interaction, the intelligence, the ambition, there was just so much of it in that one meeting. It really blew my mind. It's not like, oh, I'm not really sure what I want to do with my life. No, it's very much ambitious people that see a really good alternative to spending a ton of money on college just to get a piece of paper that says you're ready to go out into the world and do stuff. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Please continue with how you develop that relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, my first impression of Praxis was spot on to what you just described. I found Praxis pretty early on, actually, after Praxis was founded. Like I was in the process of wrapping up my senior year of high school. And high school for me was this long process of deciding that college made no sense, because I thought I was on a college track. And then the longer I went through high school, the more I realized like this just is not the logical next step for me. I don't want to do anything that requires a college degree. This is a ton of money that I would be spending for very arbitrary reasons because you're supposed to. I kind of want to see what I can do without college. Like it almost feels like this challenge. Everybody's telling me I have to go. I kind of want to be like, well, let me see what I can do with those 4 years instead. But when I found Praxis, it was like this beacon in the darkness. It was this blog. Praxis has always had a really heavy emphasis on content. So they had a really active blog, and all of the blog posts were about how to be successful without a college degree. And I was like, finally, I'm not crazy. Like there's somebody else talking about these things too. So I started following them. And like, it never occurred to me that I wanted to actually do the program, because I didn't think I wanted to go into business. Like I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to do like, I didn't even know what, but I had a long list, but it was all like non-business type things. So I didn't see the connection between what I wanted and what Praxis could offer me. But I was weirdly drawn to the program. I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard of, and I have to be a part of this. So over the course of like a year, that year after, because I started working for them as an intern, like almost exactly a year after graduating from high school. So like over the course of that first year, I just kind of slowly connected with different people in the Praxis community, like people who worked for them, participants and alumni. And then they were hiring a very, very part-time intern to help with application review. And I jumped on it like 20 minutes after it was posted. I was like, this is me. What do you need from me? Like, I'm your girl. Let's get an interview on the calendar. Like, let's make this happen. And I spent those 4 months just like doing everything in my power to convince them to keep me on at the end of that 4-month contract. I was like, I am not leaving. I want to be a part of this. Like, throw every project you don't want to do at me. I want to stay. I want to be a part of this. And like 2 weeks before my contract was over, they started throwing me projects that I could like do after my contract was over, like as a contractor. So I stayed on with them for like more than a year as a part-time contractor, just making myself useful and slowly like digging deeper and deeper into all these components of Praxis without even like a specific end goal in mind. I just knew I want to be a part of this. And then eventually they hired me on full time as their program coach. So working with participants going through those first few months of the program. And then I was with them full time for a little bit more than 3 years, doing basically everything relating to the program experience over time. It was amazing. I got to work with some incredible, incredible young people going through the program. And now I'm there as the job support advisor. So I'm working with primarily with the people in those last 6 months of the program who are on the job. They've already landed an awesome opportunity, helping them completely crush it in their new roles and figure out like what the long-term game plan is for them for career growth.
That's fantastic. Could you talk a little bit about some of the people that have gone through the program and some of the cool jobs that they're doing?
Yeah. Oh man, I have to pick some. Like there's so many. Yeah. So I mean, we have a lot of. Wow, this is a really hard question. Like, let me tell you about like all 300 of them that I've worked with over the last 3 years because they're all amazing. Like, do we have time for that? So we have a lot of participants who are working in sales roles at different tech startups and absolutely crushing it. And some of them have like gotten to a point they're really good at talking about what they're doing on like LinkedIn, or we have one who's running a sales mastermind where he just has like this weekly call. He promotes it on LinkedIn. People have to apply to join. And like every week, just a bunch of salespeople from different companies get together and talk shop about sales. So he's built a pretty solid presence on LinkedIn. There's another one who started a newsletter when he was working at his business partner. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw a participant at a completely unrelated business, no connection whatsoever, be like, hey, my boss just like shared your newsletter in Slack and was talking about how cool the things you were sharing is. Like, that's really cool. So there's a lot of stories like that of people who've like really established themselves in their industries really quickly, which is really awesome. We had a participant who, I want to say he's been working on this project for like a year or so. He built an app that launched on Product Hunt last week. It's an app that allows people to basically like offer monetary incentives for hitting their goals. So it's like this kind of monetarily incentivized accountability app. It's really cool. And it's really cool to see a Praxis participant-led business show up on Product Hunt. We have a lot of participants who've been really successful in the tech world in like different roles. We've also had people go on to be entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and artists. We have a participant who's working on publishing her first novel. We have another participant who she was a full-time painter for like a year after she graduated the program. She was just like making a living painting and doing photography until she got bored with that. Now she's running a media company. I don't know how well that answered your question. Like, this is such an overwhelming one for me. It's like, I want to talk about everybody. Does that answer your question, or are there more specific
I think you've
areas I can dig
broad
into?
Picture of the sorts of things that people go on to do, or, very inspiring stuff. I think I might know the novelist, by the way, but we can talk about her later. So, there's this sort of, I told you earlier that I used to work in Nashville, and eventually I made my way to recording studios and working on the road with bands. But, there were several steps there, and it was, finding an opportunity. And it was really funny. Like the first place that I worked at, I met this guy. He was a customer of mine, and he told me about this other place, and he said, go apply. And I did. And then I saw him there, and, 6 months later or something, saw him there. And then 6 months later, I saw him again at the recording studio that I finally got to. And there was this sort of leapfrogging, like, you're in a pond, you're going from lily pad to lily pad, just finding like the best spot for yourself. I'm wondering what sorts of techniques, ideas, principles, if you could just like give an indication of some of the things that you'll talk about in the upcoming opportunity course for spotting those opportunities and figuring out how to create value in the world?
Yeah, so I think of it, and the way I have it broken down in the course is kind of like a step-by-step process for understanding pieces of this, because it's a complete shift in paradigm to look at the world as a static, a very fixed thing where it just is the way it is. There's a bunch of rules. They're just kind of, that's how the world works. And opportunity is a very static thing where like somebody posts a job opportunity and you apply for it, and that's about the extent of it. And then seeing the world as a very malleable thing where it's just people who made up all the rules, and you can make up your rules too. And like there's no one right way to do things except what's effective for you. And if you have a really good idea or you have something that you want to make happen, there's a lot less resistance to making it happen than one might think if one just takes the world at face value. And there's a quote that I'm going to reference at the start of the course, that it's in the course description too. It was one of the things that really made this click for me early on. It's a Steve Jobs quote. It's an interview he did in like the mid 90s. I don't actually know what the context of the quote was, but he was talking about how basically he looks at the world and how the world's just made by people just like you. And you have the power to change it just as much as anyone else does. And I'm paraphrasing the quote, but that's the gist of the point he was making. And it's really true. And that's this mindset shift that is really important for people to make. And it's something, there's another great quote from Robert Kiyosaki who said, once you learn how to see one opportunity, you'll see them everywhere. And that's kind of like the shift that happens when people start operating very opportunistically. But there's a lot of like kind of sub points to that shift that need to be understood. So like once you've kind of like agreed to the premise that yes, the world is malleable. Yes, I understand philosophically that I have the power to change it. There's a lot of like logistical stuff and tactical stuff that's important to know. Like, what will people pay you for? Like, what do people find valuable and why? And how do you kind of discern like which types of opportunities are more valuable than others? Like learning how to see what might be missing. Like maybe there's like you really want to get into marketing and there's a local business that like has just a really poor online presence. They don't have much on their social media. Their Facebook hasn't been updated for a couple of years. There's no reviews on Google. It's really hard to find them. It's hard to understand like how to get in touch with them if you have questions. Like there's a whole wealth of opportunity for like things you could build for that company that would be valuable for them. That's going to make them money. So they'll pay you for it. And understanding kind of like both how to see that in the first place, like, okay, there's like a bunch of stuff missing here that would be net positive to the business if it existed, but then also like what they're most likely to find valuable. Like you could make them a really awesome, high tech, high quality marketing video because they don't have one, but maybe that's not actually very high on their list of criteria for what's important to them in making a difference. So kind of learning how to discern both what you can do that would be valuable to somebody, but also like what that hierarchy of value is and the different types of things you could do. And then understanding like how to make people take you seriously, especially if you're somebody who's just starting out in this process, you don't have a lot of credibility yet. How to open up opportunity for yourself by building credibility and making people take you seriously. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to make the world, like how to make your individual world a place that is very rich in opportunity. So how to build a network that's full of opportunity, how to position yourself in ways that allow opportunity to come to you too, as you start to build credibility and momentum. How to like think about building your general skill set to be better poised to take advantage of opportunities that come inbound to you. And we'll talk a lot too about like once you understand kind of all of the principles of how opportunity works on a very technical and logistical level, like you understand the broad phenomena and then you understand the mechanics of it, how to, like, what it actually looks like to embody that in a lifestyle. Because again, there's a really big difference between understanding a concept and embodying a concept. And so we'll dig into a lot of different examples and a lot of different stories of people who, in all different fields and areas, it's not a thing that applies to just one area. The principle of opportunity, the concept of opportunity, is universal. It applies to everything. So we'll look at like a lot of different examples of what it actually looks like in practice. And then we'll probably have a lot of time to talk about like the individual goals and desires of people in the course too. Like why are you interested in understanding opportunity? Like what types of opportunities do you want to unlock? What might that actually look like in practice? So we're going to cover a pretty broad range of points, but all with the goal of like understanding holistically what that principle and like mindset of opportunity actually means when you take it from just like this abstract thing that like, yeah, I guess some people get really lucky and have cool opportunities, so I guess they know how it works, to like something that you're actually able to use in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's ironic because sort of my relationship with the Objective Standard and now Objective Standard Institute started pretty early on. I pitched Craig the idea of doing a podcast. And as you say, you have to pitch something that the person sees as valuable. And at the time, Craig was like, yeah, I like that idea, but no, it's not really that high of value. But ironically, here we are, like 4 years later, and I'm doing a podcast and ultimately for the same employer. So I think I've long-term had the right vision there. You know, you talked a bit about sort of the mindset shift that is required for seeing opportunity. And I know you wrote recently about this sort of difference between identity and activity, and different means of seeing yourself. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how perhaps some people get tripped up over that and then therefore don't see as many opportunities as they might otherwise.
Yeah, I really like that question. This is a big one, I think, where people confuse means and ends. Like they think about becoming like so they look at, we'll use the marketing example again. They look at a local business. They want to be like, their long-term goal is to be, a flashy digital marketer who like lives in the Bahamas and posts amazing pictures of themselves sitting by the beach, like doing 6-figure marketing for internet businesses. And like, that's their goal. And they see an opportunity to do marketing for a local business. And they're like, I don't want to be a person who rewrites people's Facebook bios, or like, I don't want to be a person who's like a chatbot specialist. So like, this doesn't align with who I want to be. Therefore, I don't want to take this opportunity because I'm afraid it's going to like silo me into this thing that I don't want. And in some ways, that's not even a good example because the progression there is it's logical. It's like, yeah, well, you do marketing work and then you do higher level marketing work. And over time, you like land bigger and bigger clients and you get to do the types of things that you're really excited about. But there's a lot of inobvious steps to get towards your goal. Often, like it's not a straight line. Like you may have a goal way out here where it's like, okay, this is where I'm trying to get to, but it's usually a pretty meandering path that will get you there. And as long as what you're doing is like building more skill and taking you one step in the general direction towards your goals, it might be a great use of your time. But we think too much about like the identity of what we do in life being our identity. Like I'm teaching this course at the Objective Standard Institute next month. Does that make me a course creator? Like, am I siloed into being a course person now? Like I'm one of those online course people and I can't like go do something totally different because now she's the course girl now. Like that's not how it works, but it's very easy to fall into that trap and think of everything as an end rather than a means, which is like one step towards a much farther out, much more important end that you're striving towards in the long run. And so when you're thinking in those terms, when you remind yourself that like, no, everything I'm doing, like probably in the next 10 years is a means, like really, like everything's moving you towards a farther out end, even like a short-term end is a means to a longer term end. It gives you a lot more freedom to tackle more opportunities because you're not stuck thinking about, well, this one thing is my identity now, and I'm like siloing. It's very easy to think of everything you're doing as siloing, whereas really it's opening up more opportunity for you because it's adding a skill set and adding another check of credibility in another area that qualifies you for an ever expanding array of types of opportunities. It's an interesting paradox where it doesn't feel like that's what's happening, but really it is.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, it sort of brings to mind the image of a funnel, and people sort of think, well, I'm going into the funnel and I'm being
No, it's outwards. It's all out. It's an expanding funnel. Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
You're going in whatever direction you want to. You can take this in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
So, these people that are, I want to be in the Bahamas and doing like 6-figure marketing for internet companies or something. There's an element there of sort of glamour and passion, and I want that. And one of the things that you mentioned with Praxis, you're really excited about Praxis. You really wanted to work there. I'm wondering, to what extent does like your personal interest, your personal passion, sort of dictate where you go for opportunities? Do you think it's wrong? There's this debate about follow your passion, don't follow your passion, use something that's valuable. I'm just wondering, like, to what extent does personal interest factor in your mind?
Yeah. So I don't think it's a black or white, right or wrong answer. It's a matter of what you value. Like, do you think it's more important to be making money in the short term or holding out in the long term for like a glamorous opportunity 6 months down the road? That may not be a sound strategy for other reasons that we can talk about in a second, but like, I don't think there's necessarily a right answer. It kind of hinges on personal preference and like somebody's individual goals. But I think the specificity becomes more important the farther into your trajectory you get. Like early on, any experience is valuable. And you're more likely, again, like it's a meandering path that takes you towards your goal. It's not a straight line. So as long as you're making some progress and you're building momentum too, like thinking about momentum is really important because it gets easier and easier to land opportunities, the more opportunities you've had and the more momentum you have. But as long as you're making some forward progress, I think any forward progress is helpful. And if you're not worried about getting siloed, if you accept the premise that it's an expanding funnel and the top keeps opening up and there's more and more opportunities coming to you as you gain experience, then you're not stuck in whatever you start doing. Probably any experience that you're gaining that has at least tangential value to your long-term goal is going to make it easier to eventually hit your long-term goal. And as you get farther in your career, and you have more ability to choose because you're qualified for more things, then it becomes easier to be choosy and also more important because you're getting more specialized in specific areas. You want to be getting specialized in the areas that are exciting to you. So like in terms of loose advice, that's what I would say. Like, don't worry about it so much when you're getting started, but also when you're trying to figure it out, because it's not a one size fits all black and white answer. I think the best way to answer the question for yourself is to kind of assess your priorities. Like, what is the most important goal? Like you might have 3 or 4, top of the list goals. Like I want to be financially stable. I want to have a career that I love. I want to be able to travel if that, Bahamas goal or like wherever is part of your personal checklist. And I want a healthy work-life balance or something like that. Or maybe like I want to work with really cool companies that, people recognize the names when I mention them. They're like, oh, wow, you work for Hill? Like maybe like whatever your goals are, you kind of have to figure out like which one's the most important. And then what's the secondary? And like which ones am I willing to compromise on? And which one do I have to hit first? And like from a strategic standpoint, which ones is it most strategic to compromise on in the short term so that I can hit those long-term goals? So it's kind of a process of just like becoming really clear on what's most important to you personally to decide which trajectory you want to go down. But the simple answer is don't overthink it when you're getting started. Like, just capitalize on opportunities, and better ones will come to you, and you get to be more picky, and it won't take that long if you just keep saying yes to get the opportunity to say yes to the ones that are really exciting to you.
Yeah, I like how you put that. It really comes down to your personal values. What's your own context? It's not as if there's a rule that fits all people in all situations. It's okay, so what do I want to do? And then thinking really clearly about, okay, so what is my purpose? What's my end goal? And then what are some different means to get there? And I don't have to identify myself with those means. Those means are just,
Right.
they're just means. They're one of many ways that I can potentially get to my end goal.
Yeah. And also, your story is way more interesting when it has a lot of like side pieces to it. Like, I had all kinds of weird like side careers when I was getting started that are cool things to be able to say I did, and cool experiences to draw from that have nothing to do with my identity now. So it also makes a fun story when you
share
say yes.
now. You open that can of
Things.
worms. What are some of these cool experiences? I'd love to know.
Well, like, I worked for my first job, I worked as a vegetable farmer. Um, which was actually like a really strategic decision because I was gaining like management experience and like logistical experience that was really helpful in qualifying me for other opportunities that were much more like traditional career than vegetable farming. But then one of my first ventures out of high school was teaching writing classes to homeschool groups and then to after school programs, which it was just a thing. Like, I'd always been a writer. I roped my friends into like publishing their writing every month in a literary magazine because that was a project that I wanted to have. So I had this like background that stemmed from a place of play, but I'd actually gained experience that allowed me to have some credibility in working with homeschooled kids, teaching them how to write. And I just did it for fun and as a source of side income because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated high school, and I needed to do something. And this was a thing that I felt kind of good at, and there was an outlet for it. But it's like been recurringly valuable because it gave me some background in education that made me a little more credible to Praxis. And then Praxis makes me more credible for the education work that I do now. So again, in like the grand scheme of things, it makes sense, but it felt like just a random thing that I did because there was an opportunity to do it. But those types of things that you pick up, those opportunities, A, they make sense in your story in the long run, but B, they also make your story way more interesting. So you can also embrace them from that standpoint if you're having trouble swallowing the pill and being like, yeah, I need to go like do this thing, but it's not what I ultimately want to do, but it makes my story more interesting. So it's okay.
So if you're not currently doing any vegetable farming on the side, do you have any other like side gigs, side hustles that you're, hoping might turn into something bigger? Any other projects that you're working on that you want to share with people?
No major side projects right now. The big things are working with Praxis, doing educational stuff like this course I'm teaching, doing coaching on the side besides just at Praxis. Those are the big ones right now. I always have a couple side projects cooking that I keep under wraps. I'm a big believer. I think it was Hemingway who said, like, don't talk to people about your projects because it ruins them. But nothing super exciting I'm keeping under wraps at the moment, maybe.
Well, we're very excited to have you teaching a course at Objective Standard Institute. Any last words you want to share with people that are thinking about taking the course? Maybe they're on the fence, haven't decided yet.
If you're finding this on social media, you're always welcome to DM me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has as they're getting ready to sign up for the course. Other than that, I feel like we covered it pretty thoroughly. I feel like people should have a pretty good sense of what they're getting into if they decide to sign up.
Yep. So the course, again, is The Art of Finding and Creating Opportunity. It begins next Tuesday. And we put all our stuff in Pacific time, although neither of us are in Pacific time. I think it's, 2:30 to 4 Pacific time. So you guys do the math, figure out when that is for you. Sometime, in the afternoonish for most people in the US at least. It's going to be a great course. And if you can't attend live, you can also register and watch the recordings. We've got scholarships for people 18 to 29. And you can find all that information on our site at objectivestandard.org. Thank you so much, Hannah, for joining me. And until next time, you guys keep loving your lives and flourishing.
Thanks, John.